Hi! I want to walk through how to set up a workspace at home so that you can work in your sketchbook and on the larger sheets of paper comfortably and set you up for success. So I think one of the best things to look for in a place to work is probably some kind of stable surface. If possible, work at a desk with a flat surface. If you purchased one of those cutting mats, like here, like you can work on top of that. But preferably some kind of surface that's not going to shake or move, especially as later this semester we'll be working with rulers or maybe cutting materials or cutting knives, so you definitely want to have some kind of flat surface available to work. You shouldn't have a drawing surface that's like at chest level or up, just because that kind of pinches the shoulders. So you want to make sure that if you are drawing on a surface like a table, that it is lower. And sometimes even lower is even better, just because that's more comfortable and it allows you to move with more freedom. So you definitely kind of want to make sure that you also aren't pinched in where you're working. You want to be able to move your elbows around and have that kind of space. So if you are working in tight quarters, just try to at least make sure you have enough room next to your drawing arm so that you have room to work. But you might not have a table, so I want to show a couple other options for you as well as just a table. So let's take a look at some of those options. If you have some kind of hard board, you can use this. If you don't have table surface, you can set up a harder board and then lean your sketchbook against that to work on and almost kind of work on it as though it's in your lap. So this is good for the sketchbooks. Another thing you could do is if you do still have table surface, sometimes setting up a lot of books. I have planks of wood and my artist block for my paints. So something else you could do that will sometimes be more ergonomic than having it laying flat, and you get a better angle looking at your artwork, is setting up something like this so that you're able to kind of like look directly down and you won't be tempted to hunch over your work. So I would say this might actually be a better setup than just having something flat for drawing and prevent you from like looking down on that. And it also gives you a little bit more freedom and less of a temptation to like hover and work very tightly. So sometimes this has a tendency to slide or slip. You might put something heavy like in front of it to prevent it from sliding down as you work. But this is a great way to work on your lap. This is a small example of a drawing board. They're usually kind of hard board, maybe similar to masonite. So the ones you can find in stores often have clips where you can kind of clip a single sheet to. For sketchbooks that's harder to do, but for your larger projects, something like a drawing board might be a great option to have. But if you don't have one of these with the clips on them, you can use a large board by itself. This is from the back of a frame I had, and kind of use this to work on. This is a little big for the size that I'm working on, so it kind of has a tendency to warp. So you might use something a little bit smaller and stronger so that you can work on here. For projects that are on a single sheet of paper, you can also use a wall. I would say for drawing projects, you can probably just get away with like 4 pieces of tape on all 4 corners. If you're going to be using a material like ink or paint which has moisture in it, you'll want to tape around all 4 sides all the way around so that the whole paper can expand and shrink at the same rate. If you don't have a free wall and maybe you don't have a smooth board, if you happen to have, this is a 1/4 inch sheet of plywood cut down. This is a solid board, so you can make it portable, like sitting down, leaning against a table. This actually, the piece of furniture under here is something called a drawing horse that I hand built, which can be laid down like a bench and stood up like this, with some areas to set it down. So I use this a lot. But if you want to use a piece of wood, because it has a textured surface, it can be really cool to work on a textured surface like a piece of wood. It might come through in your drawings, but you might not find that desirable for certain media. Or if you're using pen and ink, it might cause like your drawing tool to jump when you don't want it to, if you need precise control. So sometimes what I'll do is I will tape down a couple layers of paper underneath the paper I'm going to be working on for my final piece. So I'll just kind of like tape that onto the board to cushion the drawings. So pretend I've taped that on all four sides. And I will also tape down the work. My last tip for setting up a workspace is you might need to protect the surfaces you're working on. So maybe you're working on an heirloom dining room table, or you have carpeted floors. You want to make sure you protect those because sometimes art can get messy with paint or ink, anything that can kind of drip or dribble. Sometimes it doesn't come out very easily cleaning. It's not impossible, but to prevent yourself trying to clean up like carpet or fabric, you might want to lay down something like newsprint. There's also like plastic tarps you can use on floors for like camping that you might be able to use as well to help fully cover the space you're working at and make cleanup a little bit easier at the end of the day. Another option, if you have a board, if you don't want to use tape, you can use any kind of clip to clip your paper to the board. And even if you have something like a traditional drawing board, it actually might be good to have additional clips as well. Sometimes drawing boards come with giant rubber band like things, but sometimes those rot and break after like 5 or 6 years, or you lose them. So sometimes these are good as well. So you have a bulldog clip. Here's just a typical clothespin, and these are other clips. I think this is called a Boston clip. This one is by the X-Acto brand, so by Elmer. So they have several different names out there, but something that looks and acts similarly can also work for a drawing board. And if you do have one of the other drawing boards, usually adding an additional clip near the base of your drawing will help prevent it from blowing up and away if there is wind. If where you are, you're allowed to work on the wall, you can also use 2 nails and the bulldog clips to hang your paper to the wall and work that way. You might use something like plexiglass or other newspaper underneath if you're working with something that like paint or ink that could drip and make marks on your wall. So this is one other way you can work if you have wall space.